Next row? Oh, wait, we still have this row. Carla? I'll get right to you, sir, in a moment.
Hello again, sorry about that. I wanted to submit, for the record, we have several signatures for people, and Ralph mentioned that it is not a legal binding, it's just showing the support from people in town. And I also wanted to include the board, the special meeting on July 20th. So I wanted to include with this petition, there were several people from the community who had spoke in favor of the park, and spoke very kindly. And I wanted to submit it and make sure it was recorded.
I will give that to the recording secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. Thank you. And the next row, sir.
I have two questions. Joe Kalis, 147 Job's Pond Road. Do we have any contingent plans for additional parking other than 226 cars there in the parking lot? And second, was there approval from DOT for that entrance? And are they going to have any kind of a stop sign? Would they grant it on Route 17 for exiting that park?
Ralph?
So what we have with regards to, we did go through a number of iterations, and to be honest with you, the parking number of spaces at the beginning was, we thought, too low. So they did redesign and work out so that there was more parking spaces. So based on the numbers that they projected, in discussing, other facilities, they are comfortable with that number. Certainly, if we go in a situation where, one of the things we did talk about is if we were purchasing the triangle of piece of property, that would offer a chance for looking at secondary parking if we had to worry about overflow. Again, they seem to suggest that they think that's not an issue, but we're going to suggest, potentially if we had the triangle, would offer an opportunity to maybe look. You're not going to need that whole triangle for the exit. So there will be additional land there that potentially we could look at, but we're going with the 226 for now and not concerned with thinking about we're putting more cars across in a triangle. With regards to the stop sign, yes, what it would be is there would be that stop sign would be sitting on, coming from the new piece of Strickland onto Route 17. That's how it was designed.
How about on Route 17 though?
No, you mean coming from 17 turning into Strickland, you mean?
Driving on 17, would there be a stop sign there to stop that traffic if you're trying to exit there?
No, there would not.
I leave Ames Hollow Road every day, and that traffic moves pretty fast, and your entranceway to that park is on a nice curve. I go by there every day, so I'm familiar with that area.
Yeah, no, at this time, that's the way it was designed. With regards, you asked about the DOT question, they've made iterations with if I recall, they did talk with state officials with regards to what they were looking at doing, and I don't think they had, it was a discussion, I don't know if it got to a final, it's not final sign-offs, because you don't have a final design at that point. There were discussions up front where they were looking at how they're going to address it, and I think at the point we were done with the design, they pretty much were, feel comfortable with it. Again, we don't have that property, we don't have,
Until there's an approved
They
project.
made that change at Bartlett Street, and they made that a four-way stop sign because that traffic used to go through that Bartlett Street on 17 pretty fast.
Typically, the DOT will not do the Office of State Traffic Administration, which is, I think, their title now. They typically will not do a final ruling on the traffic, whether there should be a stop sign or some three-way, four-way, whatever it might be, until approval is present, because they get, I'm sure, many, many inquiries from communities, and products may not end up getting approved. So they will review it once the approval has gone forward. There were dialogues, there were conversations that Weston and Sampson, who is the consulting engineer that did the report, had with DOT, and they also had consultations with Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, because it is a pretty large piece of land in terms of the DEEP questions. They may be, it's an old tobacco farming piece of land. They found that the residual pesticides are of a level that is far lower than many other communities have in their playing fields, and they felt that a plan can be put forward and can be monitored, self-monitored by the town. So there were conversations with the state agencies, but nothing definitive because the project has not been approved.
I'm sure there'll certainly be more discussions before the final,
there would
the final entry is completed, so,
Yeah, there would have to be. Anyone else in that row? The back row? Yes, Ken? We'll start with Ken.
Ken Kupek, 337 Main Street. First of all, I thought the park presentation was very well done, but I did want to go back to the maintenance question, because I thought what I heard is we're building a $6 million park, but the additional maintenance is only $43,000 for lime.
For material, yes.
What about cutting the grass, taking care of the trees?
That's 3/4 of a person.
So there's no additional maintenance costs other than lime?
I just threw lime as an example. There are, we sat with Carl Johnson, and he went through, he did an analysis of what other products, materials would be needed. And, take into account if we exit the leased properties, the reduction in use there, applying that to use in a new facility. And he came up with that number of $43,000. And then the other number was his estimate of what he thinks in terms of manpower. Ultimately, we talked about the splash pad, and we're not totally sure about the splash pad.
Yeah, so my second question was, because I do have an insurance background, have you even quoted what it would cost the town for a splash pad?
From insurance standpoint?
Yeah.
Typically, Kerma, who is our provider, and I know that you work for
Someone else.
It's another company. We do give to them a listing of our products that in our buildings and things that go onto our list, and then they give us our quote based on that. I will certainly speak with our sister community, Cromwell, that just put in a splash pad. I know they also get their insurance through Kerma, and see if there's any. We don't typically do additional quote-unquote riders for new matters that may be encompassed with municipal properties.
So, I mean, I do think that a park that you presented helps make Portland a destination, which is what we're trying to get to. My only concern would be that when you talk about building a $6 million park, there are additional maintenance charges or increases in current maintenance, and are you going to be back at the table asking for additional funding, or have you planned on absorbing that in your current budget?
We don't, no, it will be something we'll have to discuss. It's probably going to be part of, once a park we build, we would be incorporating into the park and rec budget, or the associated group that does stuff for park and rec. That's not in the current budget now. And the number, again, Carl feels comfortable with the number, so the number we're talking about is realistic. Ultimately, it does come into where it fits into the budget for the town.
Okay.
If I can add something to it as well. I happen to be at that meeting that you were having about that, and one of the things that I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, the materials was about 43 grand, and the three-quarters person, I think we calculated it was about $100,000 a year hard cost for the park and maintenance, but that was going to be offset, I think in the majority, from what I recall, by various fees and having different events there and the whole bit. So the fees charged for food being sold and other things, and charges for the different events outside of just the baseball.
So that makes more sense to me than just that
Right.
you're going to have a $43,000
Right.
additional expense in maintenance.
Right, so, and then, there were other kind of intangibles where, you can get like, some of the groups to kind of help out and do things and plant flowers and all that kind of stuff. But I think it was $100,000 from what I recall was the labor, the three-quarters person and the stuff that needs to be there,
And
materials.
then the money that you raise from the use of the park is going to offset
Could offset.
additional maintenance.
So I don't want to get anyone excited, because realistically, I don't believe it will offset all of that. I mean, our conversation, we talked about how you could run that. It'll contribute to helping
Yep.
with that, but I don't, until we have done a more of an analysis from that standpoint, I don't want anyone going into the belief that there'll be zero change.
Yep. Which goes back to the original question of, have you actually sat down and figured out, here's what the park's going to cost us in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Because as the park ages, maintenance is going to increase.
I understand, we'll talk about it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Yes, Steve?
Steve Krusberg, 375 Gospel Lane, and I just like to say, as a member of the Complete Streets Group and as a walking citizen in town, I think safety is very, very important, and I think sidewalks are very important, especially safe sidewalks are very important, especially near schools. And I was very impressed by the park presentation tonight. I'm very impressed by that, and I'd like to see, many citizens in Portland, be able to participate and enjoy the park once it is built. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Alvin?
Elwin Dial, Middle Adam Road. I'd like to suggest, how do I say this? Permeable surfaces that would affect both your recreation park proposal as well as the town's need for sidewalk improvement. I have yet to hear, and I'm surprised that I have yet to hear, any consideration of using a permeable surface both in the park and for sidewalks. And what I'm suggesting is, let's get rid of the concrete, let's get rid of the asphalt, and put down a sensible stone bed with a final cap of stone dust in the same way that the airline trail is managed and very effectively. I think in most cases, it would provide a durable, maintainable, low cost, and significantly permeable surface, particularly for the recreation park where you've got a wetland already, and you're going to put a parking area in there for 230 cars that's hard surfaced. I don't understand why you would ever put an asphalt track as a walking path when you could put a stone dust path that would accommodate bicycles. Or I'm almost shocked that it hasn't been elevated before tonight. And Fred Mouse, I know that you've got the big picture for the town in mind with sidewalks, Mr. Sidewalk. The one thing that jarred me a bit tonight was the mere mention in the Public Works proposal that in taking their approach, that it would impact, that's the word I'm looking for, it would impact our tree canopy, because as we all know, tree roots tend to grow and lift each one of those concrete slabs, and so we'd have to ameliorate that by, I assume, removing even more trees, and I would think that'd be a horrible, horrible mistake. Just take a look at Fairview Street and you'll see the answer. That's all I want to comment. Thank you.
Yes.
So, with regards to the surfaces we're talking about, we have had discussions with regards to the actual parking and whether it would not be a paved site, it would be more, we've had that discussion. To be honest with you, off the top of my head, I don't remember where we landed. We know that that's potentially an area where we would change. I don't see us straying, though, from the paved the walking path, because the intent there is really to cover everyone. And I'm not really sure about pushing a stroller down the stone dust. And so,
They do it on the airline trail every day.
and do people in wheelchairs go down the trail? I don't know. It's something we certainly can discuss. The other thing that came into play when we had conversations is that we are going into a neighborhood, and the concern with stone dust was creating stuff floating around into the neighborhood. So those are the discussions. I'm not saying that it's not something that we could certainly talk more, and we could certainly take a look at that and what you're saying. I appreciate the comments, and we'll discuss it. But that's ultimately where our discussion came from and what we're trying to address.
Thank you. Anyone else in the back row? Okay, we'll go to this back row. Michael?
Hello, Mike Angelotti, 4 Victoria Road. And a question was brought up about the actual question that is going to be voted on. I thought Tuesday night when we left, the question we were discussing was set, other than adding language about utilities underneath the road and/or shifting of monies that were left over in certain projects to other projects. Is that,
We have Bruce Chudwick here that can address that. Because that question did come up on Tuesday as well. I mean,
That was at the
last
long-term
week.
capital plan?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was not a formal vote by the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen is the ultimate power to set the questions, and that had been scheduled for their regular meeting tomorrow night. So
Now,
the
is it-
questions have not been set yet.
but they had that special meeting with you on that Friday, so you had a public hearing, you had to set a date with 7 days prior.
For the public hearing, right, to gather input before they make the final decision of what the
Well, would
questions
that
are.
question be, as she read tonight, would be the question, or can they can change it without any other notice of the change of question?
They could break down the 3 projects that have been sent to this public hearing into separate questions if they
Okay.
wanted to do that. Again, that'll be decided tomorrow night.
And the dollar figures cannot change?
The dollar figures, our opinion is that you cannot go above the $10 million. If there were going to be a reallocation within the projects, that would be acceptable, but you can't go to 15 million now that you warned a public hearing for 10.
Right.
So, again, that will be decided.
Well, someone asked the question, and I thought that's what we talked about. You
Yeah.
couldn't go above, you only go below.
You could always reduce it from the public hearing, right? But to go significantly higher, we'd have to re-warn another public hearing.
Another,
Although, Bruce, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Brian.
Because this came up too. Are we limited, is the ceiling set for each project, though?
No.
So you
That's
could
not.
conceivably, just hypothetically, take the park and move to $10 million or $9 million if you wanted to, or the sidewalks.
Hypothetically, but again, my concern is the integrity of the public hearing and what people saw in the paper and chose to either come or not to come to tonight's event. To have a significant change in it could cause some problems. I think within the categories, you can make changes, but to take one entire piece of a project perhaps and throw it out and have reallocated to another project, we may want to think about having another public hearing.
Essentially, dealing with the numbers that we talked about.
Exactly.
Okay,
Right.
fair enough.
Okay.
And another question, why do we come up with a 20-year note? Because we all know this, not just the park, sidewalks elsewhere, things aren't going to last that long. We're going to be dumping more money. Like the guy said, look, maintenance, is it going to become an issue? You're going to overhaul that park once, possibly twice in 20 years. Parking lots are not going to last. Look at your high school. It's already falling apart. They're asking for a lot of money to fix what they have.
School is a 20-year note
And
as well.
we're only 14 years in.
There's more reasons than just maintenance and upkeep. There's also the whole concept, and I'll have our professionals speak to this, but I'll tell you my thoughts. When, for example, you use the high school as an example, Michael, that was a $40 million question that was on the ballot, of which about half was reimbursed by the state and the other half was bonded by the town. The people that are living in the town in year one pay a portion of the use of that building, just as the people that are going to live in the town in year 10 or year 15 or year 20. So to have 1 year, you pay everything, would certainly be impossible to do. So there's an idea that you want to put the cost of these products over a period of time. There are, I'm sure, laws associated with what you can bond and how you do that, so I'm going to have David and Bruce speak to that.
It could be a shorter bond, why is it 20?
Yes, yeah, it can be. Under Connecticut, there are two factors. First of all, under Connecticut state law, you cannot issue bonds for longer than 20 years in general for projects. School projects, you can go out 30, actually, 30-year bonds, because they're longer lived projects. So there you have state law limitations, but you don't have to go out 20 years. You can always bond for a shorter period of time. That is what we would work with the first select woman and the board and Tom Robinson, the financial advisor, to put the package together that best suits the town's needs as far as how long you bond for. The other piece is you can't bond short-lived projects or properties for a longer period of time. You can't take rolling stock like trucks and bond it for 20 years. Sure. That's an IRS tax problem. You can't do that on a tax-exempt basis. So those factors come into play how we would finance it. But 20 is the max, can always go shorter.
Did we look
David, did you want to add to that?
Come on, Dave.
I think that working with Bruce, First Selectwoman Tom, we will put together a package. We looked at 20 as a way to accomplish the projects and maintain tax rate stability. That was really our charge. But we, as time goes on, perhaps looking at the results of the revaluation that will take effect in fiscal 18, it's possible that we would reevaluate this. But the structure that we developed was really charged by the fact that we were looking to maintain tax rate stability, among other things.
Thank you.
The long-range capital report that you've been speaking about, just so everybody knows, the Board of Selectmen charged us a couple months ago to come up with absolute needs and wants from the directors throughout the town. The park, the sidewalks, and the road were something the Board of Selectmen were working on prior to the request to the long-range capital. So the report that you see doesn't even encompass all the departments. It's quite a bit of money. I reviewed it a few times to see if anything was out of whack that we could get rid of, or, you know, there always been things that were a little ridiculous, but there wasn't. There's a lot of things in there. And that's why I'm against the question as written. It does not reflect all the true needs in which your directors presented and it was reported to you. And like I said, I'm also against a 20-year bond. I think it's a little too long. In the 20 years, the park will deteriorate. You will need repairs, overhaul. Same with sidewalks. And I would like to thank everybody here who we've worked with throughout the process. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I've had a very nice time. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I see a hand. Brian.
Good evening, Brian McCarthy, 3 Woodland Road. I chaired the Park Design Committee, which, so I've been out of the process for about a year now, but I know that Ralph and Carl have been taking it forward since then. One thing I think, the point of clarification that I think come up, I think our maintenance costs are factoring in that we would no longer maintain Ingersoll or Tomaso. Just kind of wanted to make that clear, right? And certainly, you know, I would echo the comments on the permeable pavement. That's certainly a factor, but we also are very sensitive to dust in the neighborhood. I think maybe the walking paths is certainly something there, but I think the parking lots would be with vehicles coming in and out. We were concerned about dust there, but that's certainly, I think, something that would merit reconsideration. In terms of the budget, we talked about this during design. There were a number, I'm also, the disclosure, I'm a civil engineer and a construction manager, so I deal with capital projects for my livelihood. There are ways to structure the bid proposal to break things out into alternates and so on, so that we can pretty readily come up with something and with ways of breaking things out to see, what would be able to fit into the budget. And I think that the budget that's proposed is reasonable based upon what I recall from last year. A couple of questions for on the financial side, and I don't know whether this was part of your charge. You could opine on this. With the proposed financing, what, if anything, does that do to the borrowing capacity of the town or potentially to our bond rating? To me, it seems like a relatively minor amount that would have minimal effect, but I don't want to assume that. I'd like you to comment on that if you could.
I think that there are a number of ways in which one can look at borrowing capacity. I think in terms of what is fiscally prudent, certainly the fact that the town is able to accomplish this while maintaining a stable tax rate is one indication that that it does have borrowing capacity. But if one looks at this the way that the rating agencies look at this, then I would say yes, the town does have additional capacity, but that's how much capacity depends really on how one frames the question. But I think certainly the $10 million, I wouldn't expect that it would have a negative effect on the town's credit rating.
And then one last comment. I would like the board to consider breaking the item into more than one question, particularly with regards to the park, since it is the most significant piece of expenditure. The other two items are a little bit more closely related, perhaps. We've been talking about this for a long time, as Ralph mentioned, and have had a lot of public input. And I think most people kind of know, if they've been informed about it, and would know one way or the other. And I think it's time for us to either fish or cut bait. We're either going to move forward with this or we're not. And so we'll let the people decide. And so I urge you to go ahead and put it on for referendum. It's a presidential year. We should get high turnout, despite the choices that are offered at the top of the ticket. But there are a number of other things that are important for us all to consider. So, let the people put it to a vote, and let the people decide, and then we can move on one way or another.
I will point out, since you mentioned voting in November, that the Registrar of Voters and the Town Clerk's Office has established the voting location will be the Portland Secondary Schools. So there'll be plenty of room to park, since there is no school on voting day, and plenty of room to get under cover should there be inclement weather. So they made that determination to make sure that you are well accommodated for parking and voting. So every opportunity I take, I remind people of that.
And I'm sorry, one last question I just thought of. What is the final date that the town has to register with the Secretary of State in terms of putting the questions on the ballot?
Thursday has to be, the notice has to go to the Secretary of State's office by this Thursday.
So 2 days from now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Yes,
Hey, Brian,
Joe?
and maybe Ralph, can you talk about the costs again on the access? Do I understand? And I apologize for being away this summer and stuff, but just explain what the budget of $5 million, does that include all the access to 17? What is missing?
So again, as I had noted, because of the work that was done to analyze the front, the entrance, a good amount of engineering went into that work, so the work was not complete.
There was, I think the base cost estimate for construction assumes what you saw on the plans. And then I think they built into the budget some additional engineering design work, plus some as part of the contingency, if the plans change to do the entrance, is part of the budget, as I recall, kind of the way it was left. But
We don't have the final number, obviously, because we don't have the property and the engineers couldn't finish the work that was done.
But the base estimate, I think, included the entrance that was in the concept drawings, to build that, so.
So the cost includes getting to 17? Yes.
Excluding real estate. Correct. Sorry for the record, Joe Balskis, 161 Joe's Pond Road. My neighbor's over there, he spoke. The reason I'm asking that question with the cost, and I apologize for not being part of the previous discussions, I've been a little crazy at stuff and work, is that I presented before about the access, and I identified that I can save the town money on this project. I can save the town money in terms of submitting to DOT an application for funding for a roundabout at the entrance, which would take out a lot of the road that you're showing in the plans, and Strickland Road as well. Take all that out, and you can cut back in costs right there, and submit the DOT funding through the DOT's funding program for a roundabout on 17 to address some of the safety issues that we've talked about that are inherent with a simple stop sign. Yes, but there are safety issues involved with the access for a park being used by all users. So there's money to be saved here. We don't have to spend the $6 million as we're showing. We can save money with funding from DOT. And they just gave the town of Glastonbury $1.5 million for a roundabout on House Street. So there's money there. In fact, I do know that the DOT can't spend that money enough. There's not enough towns asking for that money. So there's savings to be realized there on this great project that I fully support, as you can imagine, and Sean and all the work that Sean's done, Ralph's done, and Chris has done. Everyone's done a great job. The video was awesome. I love that video. That was a great video. So I support 100%. I do think, as Brian said, we should have 3 questions. We really should. Because the question on Brownson Avenue, there's an opportunity there for funding from DECD. I don't know if you've been aware of that yet, but DECD does provide funding for towns for economic development purposes, for brownfields, for infrastructure related to economic development. So there's funding out there from DECD that can be submitted and, to get a grant that they would fund 100%. There's that. There's also funding through DOT, through the urban program, as you're aware. That's 80-20, 80% DOT, 20% the town. So I want to see the questions be 3 questions, because I think that the second question on the roadway improvements can be found elsewhere. I really do. I think especially the time period we're talking about. We're talking 2020. So you can find funding for that. You got to submit the applications on it, but you get funding for Brownstone Avenue as opposed to put it in a ballot. I know it's already there, but you could take the money, as we said, and put it elsewhere if you get money from DOT for reconstructing Brownstone Avenue. And the same goes for the sidewalks, too. There's enhancement funds for the sidewalks, too. So I support the project 100%. I think there's money to be saved here. We've heard that already. We could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We could save money on the access. We don't have to buy the entire property. My students did a concept and plan which shows a small piece of that corner property with a roundabout. And we can get the roundabout funded as well. And I also suggested last time that I would also do the design. So there's no cost to the town to do the design of the roundabout at the same time. We're making it safer for all residents, because it is the safest intersection control out there. Stop signs are not safe as compared to roundabouts. There's no left turns. There's no left turns judging who's coming at you at the higher speeds. So kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get on the ballot, but do 3 questions, and we're good to go. Thank you.
So you just want to explain your background a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a professional engineer, transportation engineer, and I do these projects all the time. I'm doing 2 roundabouts in Glasgow right now, and I'm also very well versed in the applications for submitting applications to DOT and DECD for funding for various projects. So, but my whole point is that there's opportunities there to save money that we're talking about. We don't have to spend $6 million. We can save money, or save money on this and use it for somewhere else in the project. Thank you.
Now, I want to ask Bruce to just address that. We talked a little bit about the potential for other ways of funding, but the reason that we put the number where we put it is because that's the project.
As far as the
Potential for...
The resolutions are appropriations and bond authorization. The appropriation is how much the town can spend. If you get grants, then you just borrow less. So you're capped at the 6, 3.5, and $500,000. So if you get a grant for $2 million on the park project, then you would end up bonding only $4 million, but you're authorized to spend the $6 million. So you just can't accept grants and spend them without some authorization from the legislative body to do that, so.
Thank you for that clarification. Michael,
Excuse
we'll
me, but
go.
there can always be another authorization subsequently to do whatever you want to do.
And I would think a town meeting would be receptive to accepting a grant and spending it when it doesn't cost the taxpayers anything.
Right.
Michael, if you have a clarification, otherwise I want to give everyone a chance to speak. If you have something new to say, or is it a clarification? Okay. Okay, anyone else in the back row? The next row? And you've already had a chance. Anyone in the front row? Okay. And we'll go back to Michael. Oh, okay.
Short.
No, I will not repeat. No, in relation to
Shirley,
the-
just give your name if you would for...
Shirley Olson, Russell Avenue.
Thank you, Shirley.
In relation to the Long-Range Capital Improvement Commission report that came out, there are items for the existing parks and recreation areas, one of which is Middlesex Avenue, and I'm wondering how this is going to be addressed, considering that the town park is not going to pop up automatically, and there are significant improvements to be done on Middlesex Avenue, and it's multi-user. It's used for recesses for school. It is used for their physical education programs. It is used for parks and rec activities, the football, the soccer, and it's also used by the community. People will go down after school and kids practice soccer, small groups that are going to private school practice. And in this plan for Middlesex Avenue, there is a plan for a path. Now, there is limited access to the track at the Portland High School for people to use the track to walk. And I'd like to know, is this particular project an absolute need, just going to drop out of sight?
In fact, there are plans for some improvements to Middlesex Avenue, and I'm going to have Carl Johnson come and speak to those improvements to the selectmen at another time. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you.
If there's no one else that wanted to speak, then I will go back to Michael.
I want to speak about the question again. It was under the assumption that would be one question. In meeting with all your directors, that's what they asked for, was one question, so it would be a fair question to all. It's either all or nothing, up or down. They didn't want the public to pick and choose, because there are needs that you're seeing that are needed throughout the town. So they all, like I said, say it again, I'll speak on behalf of Rick and the rest of them, they wanted one question, not split up into three. And they all supported that, and it was their idea.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, Susan,
Yes,
Bruce, if
sir.
I could ask you, the question could actually be four, right? In other words, the roads versus the sidewalks could be two separate questions.
Yes, yep. As long as you're within the 10 million for there really are 4 embedded projects between the roads and right, it could be 4 if you want to do that.
The only matter that may be something that our financial advisor might want to advise. Theoretically, if you had 4 questions with 4 different numbers, and if theoretically only one becomes a yes and the others become not yeses, it's a small amount to bond.
True.
And the costs incurred with bonding could become problematic, because we're talking sizable amounts. The town has to go for a rating agency and also has to pay for the issuance costs associated with putting all of the legal and financial matters together. So I just wanted to point that out to the select.
When does it become problematic? What number?
Well, it's a larger percentage of the 500,000 capital projects, to spend $80,000 to do a bond issue for 500,000 capital projects.
Sure.
It's a little better when it's over 10 million, obviously, so.
Because of the issuance.
Following up on the...
You want to use the microphone,
Sure.
Fred, so everybody can hear you, please?
Just to follow up on a question that Selectman Flood had regarding the question, again, looking for clarity. I understand what you were saying regarding the spirit of the language, but I'm still a little bit fuzzy on just what can be done by the Board of Selectmen within the parameters of the call. You mentioned that the board can't go way out of the boundary of an appropriation. For example, if the park was 6 million, we can't go to 1 million, for example. That would not be appropriate. But what I'm not clear about, the point I'm not clear about is what actually can be done in terms of the amounts can be adjusted, but can the amounts be adjusted outside of the specific items that are in that in the call? For example, we talked a lot about parks. Suppose there was a motion to specify another specific appropriation for parks that's not listed in the call. Could that be done? Or could a special, something that's not in the call at all, be included? For example, $500,000 for a vehicle purchase, for example.
Well, for the parks, the warning specifically provided was for the park on Route 17 in town. So are you talking about a different park altogether? I think that would be problematic. Again, that's it was warned as that particular park for the $6 million. Within the capital projects, within the $500,000, or miscellaneous capital projects, and I don't think they were specifically identified as part of the warning of the meeting, so I think you have some flexibility there to go for other types of projects within that $500,000. Similarly, with the sidewalks and the roads, I think the warning was for $3.5 million for sidewalks and roads together. So you have some flexibility to go between those two types of items and do a little more for roads and less for sidewalks if you want to. I just get concerned about gutting or make significant changes to any particular project where it hasn't been properly warned for the public hearing. So there's some flexibility there. That's maybe something we can work through in more detail tomorrow night.
Bruce will be here tomorrow night as well. David?
David Labadia, 49 Deerfield Lane. I just want to bring up, when you're talking tomorrow about the questions, one versus many, you kind of run the risk of forcing somebody into sort of a discrete choice model, or they get through question one and they say, oh, I just spent $6 million. I'm not even going to read the other three. I'm just suggesting that put a lot of thought into the order. Whoever comes first might have some sort of priority or favoritism for somebody to choose from. So splitting 1 to 4 has more risk than you might think on the back end.
Thank you. Mr. Basso?
Richard Basso, 345 Gospel Lane. I live right next door to this proposed park. And I'm also on the steering committee for the park. So obviously I am for the park. I just wanted to throw this out there. Number one, I'm for one question, not several, one. And I'll tell you why. For all the little things I want to see everything pass. Because I don't want to see the can being kicked down the road year after year after year and nothing get done. It's about time we did something for the good of the town of Portland. One question. Thank you.
Yes, Karen?
Karen Labadia, 73 Penfield Hill Road. I followed a lot of the discussions about the park. I've come to many of the meetings, and I've stood up here and said the same thing. Been a longtime resident of Portland. We bought this property over 10 years ago for $500,000 for the specific purpose of providing a recreational park for the town of Portland. We owe it to our citizens to provide a park for the citizens in Portland. We want to bring people in. We're talking about building a new housing complex that's supposedly going to draw people into town. You have to provide services for people to want to come into town. I've specifically gone around with my grandchildren this summer, and it's ridiculous. They're 2.5 years old, and if we want to just go and play in a splash pad, we have to plan a whole day adventure because you have to drive to either Colchester or Glastonbury or Cromwell, and it's not just a quick stop. You've got to pack the kids up and load them into the car and go off. It's ridiculous. A splash pad is a very pleasant experience for families. It really is. Very low key. It doesn't, I'm not an insurance expert, but it doesn't look terribly threatening to me, and I've been to several of them. The fitness park for the seniors, a great idea. Where did I see it? Middlefield. I had to go to Middlefield to see what they had over there for a fitness park for adults. I think it's time that we move it. And really, $6 million in today's world. Look at the cost of a house today, okay? A house. The average home is $250,000. That's the average home. And we're talking about being able to serve an entire community for a $6 million investment. I think it's well worth it. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to add to the discussion tonight? Yes. Please be careful.
Leave my crutches behind. Erin Gatto, 10 Myrtle Road. I moved here about 2.5 years ago and grew up in Glastonbury, lived in Enfield for several years before that, and we moved here because I teach in Glastonbury. We just wanted to be close to my school, and it wasn't until I looked around for about a year and I went, oh my gosh, there's nothing to do in this town. There's nowhere to meet people. I got involved with soccer, and that's really the only way as a family that I could meet people, that my children could meet people, that I got to meet families in town. And truly, I was astonished that there was nowhere to do that, except maybe Inner Circle Martial Arts, perhaps, if you sign up for some classes. And we still drive to Glastonbury to go to Riverfront Park, and we drive to other towns to go to parks where both my kids can play instead of just being on that one tiny little playground behind the police station. And I just think, coming from towns, yes, they're bigger towns, I understand that, but the community feel that comes with being able to go with your family and have children of all ages, or have your the grandparents come. I know Rick Kelsey said in his memo that it's a want. I don't believe that. I think it is absolutely a need for this town if we're going to have a sense of community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, Karen. Got you next. That's okay.
I also agree with the one question, because I think it was presented that way in the paper to the public, and not everyone was able to come this evening, and I think changing that is going to look not as upfront. We know what the amounts are. I'm living in fear that if we list them separately, there's going to be people that are going to look at the list of questions, and they're going to look at the amounts, and they're going to say, $6 million. We can't afford that, and they're just going to throw it off the table, and they'll look at the two smaller ones. I think every one of those items is really important. I think sidewalks in town is an extremely important thing because people are walking, and you could do a lot more walking if you could go up Main Street and up Spring Street and not have to worry about dodging traffic. I live out in the country, so I know all about dodging traffic. So I think the one question should really be the way it's presented.
Thank you for your, sir.
Chad Wilson, 162 Apple Tree Lane. I take my family to Riverfront Park frequently in Glastonbury, and whenever we go, some of the other residents will talk to me, and I typically don't want to talk to them because I live in Portland and you live in Glastonbury, and I don't really want to connect with you right now. But wouldn't it be great if when I'm at the park, I could actually connect with some of the people that I live in the same town with and actually talk to them and open up and have a conversation and enjoy that experience with them? And so I imagine that, and I think that would really be great. I do have a question. Does Strickland Street, is the plan that it will still connect to the neighborhood and that the kids, if they want to ride their bike to the park, they won't have to go down Route 17 to get into the park? They can actually just come from the back neighborhood? I think that's great too. When I was a kid, I rode my bike to places to go meet other friends. And would that give kids something to do? Could they get on their bike and ride down to the park and meet their friends and play? I think that's great for our children. And I think it benefits that area greatly. Now, if you're in other areas of the town, maybe you don't actually get that bicycling benefit, but it sounds like some of the other things that we're talking about putting in one question could benefit other areas of the town. So I think the way I'm hearing it, it sounds like we have one question. We're asking the people of Portland, do you want to make your town better? And this is a great way to do that through one question and really capture a lot of different aspects of life and living in Portland.
Thank you.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to add, or, yes?
Hi, Jen Oliva, 18 Courtney Lane. I just am speaking to support the new park. I moved here about 10 years ago, and I wasn't really thinking too much about recreational opportunities. I didn't have children then. Then we had 2 children, and like a lot of other people that have spoken, I'm going to Colchester, Glastonbury, Cromwell, Weathersfield, and that made me realize, oh, did I make the right decision coming here? But now I love this community. I want to stay here. I also, having 2 children, have noticed when one child is playing a sport, my other child is running around with nothing to do. So I think having this complex and having other things, playgrounds, maybe a basketball court for the other children to do is fantastic. The other thing that concerns me is property values. My neighbor just sold their house a month ago for $150,000 less than what they listed it for. And I think they probably took a loss of 6 figures from about 10 years ago. And they said they had a really hard time finding buyers competing with the surrounding towns because I don't mind paying more in taxes or high taxes, but I want to feel like I'm getting something for it. And I think the school system does that for me. And I think this park is a tangible way to feel that I'm getting something for the money. And then to another person's point for recreational opportunities, I love a place to go jogging and work out. I don't go down my street because a different neighbor got hit by a car, a hit and run accident, and he was fine, but it just feels really dangerous because the roads are very narrow. So I think this park would be great for all residents, all ages. So, thank you.
Thank you. Did I see anyone else's hand? Go up. Charlie?
In relation to, there was something brought up in relation to safety and how the park is going to be monitored. Did anyone go down to Portland Riverfront Park and see the graffiti that was all over the brownstone down there in the park that they had just worked on? The graffiti was all over also the storage buildings on Middlesex Avenue, and the police right through there frequently on the stop signs. And that park is rather far away from the center of town, that's all. Not the Riverfront Park, but the one on Route 17.
Thank you. Jim?
Jim Tripp, 74 Middle Haddam Road.
Strong supporter of the park. It is definitely something we need to do in the community. I heard it even a couple times tonight, talking with various members at a meeting I was at before, where people have said the same thing. We don't really have these kinds of opportunities in town. There's not a lot of places to go. At the Riverfront Park, we'll be able to create some passive opportunities. We see this as a sister park in a lot of ways. This is where the active, much more active, organized, the sporting, etc., and a lot of the other amenities like the splash pad, the playscapes would reside. So the two parks would work very well in tandem together. I strongly see this as a one-question issue. I think you can really muddle the issue if it's multiple questions. And I also think that in terms of what we need in the community, we need the sidewalks. We need a park, we need some of the other improvements, and I'd rather not see contention between the groups. I'd rather see sort of advocacy for all of the needs versus contention between the groups doing that. Regarding the security, and just go back to the graffiti, because that's something that hit a little close to home. Fortunately, just so everyone knows, the culprits were caught. We have done things like cameras and things of that nature down there, but because of the construction, the cameras were off when this occurred. But there was a lot of good work done by the police, and they did find them, and restitution's been made. When we did the design, and we're looking at the design for this park, there were a lot of things that were done in the design to basically set up and be ready to install cameras. It's not in the initial cost unless something's changed from what I recall, but making sure that there was sort of some pre-provisioning because we need to take those types of things into account, and it's much cheaper to do it up front than if you do it later. So that was also a consideration. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Patrick Farley from Middle Haddam Road. Just again, a supporter of the park. I think it's a great thing for the community. Presently coaching the fall ball baseball team, and in the moment example of something to do. I have my daughter and my son, and my son's playing, and my daughter needs to sit on the side at Nolan Field, waiting, really nothing to do there, where if we were at a park where there was a facility like this one, the one we're presenting, there'd be a lot for her to do. And it's also, I know it was mentioned, the locations of those fields aren't the best locations, and it's nothing less than embarrassing to go into the dugouts with beer can bottles and nipper bottles and stuff in there. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with the location of the fields, and I think that the new field would be great for, again, the whole family can go out. You got, people walking, playing different sports, so definitely a strong supporter of the park, and I hope also it comes out as one question. I think it could get confusing if you start putting numbers next to the individual questions, and I think you'll have a lot of people that will possibly make maybe not the best decision by just based on the numbers. I think the one question would be a great thing. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Patrick. Anyone else? I know some of you have spoken at other meetings, and some of your comments are in the minutes that Carla brought to us, so that's helpful. And I know there's many, many names on this list that I will share with our recording secretary and will be made part of the record. If there's no more comments, I don't know if Bruce or David wanted to make any final comments about tomorrow night. If you're looking for additional time to spend with us, we'll be here, and I hope you do, tomorrow night, 7:30, regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting. If you can't attend, we do have our meetings put up on YouTube, so you'd be able to watch the meeting if you're not able to be here. They're not immediate, but our town tech program does a fabulous job of keeping us all informed and communicating with one another. We'll also certainly welcome comments from our newspaper articles, which we hope will be forthcoming. With that, I will close the public hearing at 9:25 p.m. and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. Good job. We say so ourselves. Bravo.
I know, bravo. Pat in the back. Very nice.
Nice. One of my better public hearings.
That was good. That's pretty good. One question.